Hi, welcome to the Stories Beside channel. Enjoy watching. Happiness is there. It cannot not be. Simple, feminine, quiet. It is the secret desire of every woman, even those who shout loudly about their independence and self-sufficiency. Most often, it is those who will never admit their weakness, more than anything else in the world want to be dependent, to be cared for, pitied, solve their problems, and given gifts. So thought the young Madeleine, sitting in the passenger compartment of the car, cradling the envelope with the tiny girl in it. Half an hour ago, she and her daughter were discharged from the maternity hospital. At the discharge was her husband, his parents, and friends. There was no one on her side. Her parents had been killed in an accident. Little Madeleine was barely a year old. She was raised by her grandmother on her mother's side. But she left the girl, leaving a small inheritance in the form of an old, but still a strong house in the village. Friends remained in another city, and communication with them gradually came to naught. They all had their own affairs, hobbies, interests. Common topics of conversation were becoming less and less common. Each built her own life. As a result, her husband and his family were her only family. And then the other day she had another family member, her little girl. Now she planned to focus all her attention and teaching experience on the most beautiful baby girl. Madeleine graduated less than a year ago. She had barely had time to start working with first graders, making plans for her future when she found out about a completely unexpected and unplanned pregnancy. Her boyfriend, with whom she was dating at the time only a few months. He took the news calmly and even somewhat indifferently. He was not overjoyed, but he did not force her to terminate the pregnancy. By the evening of that day, he went to her with a ring and proposed marriage. The wedding was held in a quiet family circle. Fortunately, the elderly Kayla grandmother had time to give her granddaughter one last goodbye before she quietly retired. It was in honor of her grandmother that Madeleine decided to name her daughter Kayla. She did not listen to her mother-in-law, who considered such an act a bad omen, and she planned to register the child right after she was discharged and give her the chosen name. Her husband was not against it. He expressed little emotion at all and was somewhat detached from everything that had been going on in recent months. In general, Jacob was the model of a man. Tall, handsome, confident, and reliable. I will be behind him like a stone wall, she thought. However, her grandmother immediately warned her granddaughter, Madeleine is not yours. He is not a reliable person, and he listens to his mother's opinion too often. No, I'm afraid he might start dragging into his family the laws that his grandmother, established. What makes you say that? Yes, he's close to his mother, but that's a good thing. He'll treat me the same way. Oh, I wish you'd say that to God. That's not the case. He listens to her because he's been scared and angry since childhood. And such people take out their anger on those who are weaker. Think about it. However, the girl was won over by the guy's deed, which preceded their acquaintance. Madeleine, still a student, was returning home late one day, and she was accosted by hooligans in an alleyway. A passing-by guy was not indifferent and defended the girl. That's how she met Jacob. She wasn't in a serious relationship at the time, so there was no reason not to accept his advances. The man was almost 10 years older than her, had a high-paying job, planned to buy an expensive foreign car, the only son his parents had. He paid for their vacations and all major expenses. That was why it was not a happy news for them that he was going to get married. Yes, and the girl hapless was not the party they had hoped for. Knowing the character of their son, who had already changed several girls, they hoped that this infatuation would quickly pass. The young people became close fairly quickly and began to live together. And after a short period of time, they found out that they would become parents. Pregnancy flew by rather quickly. The only thing that overshadowed it was the passing of her beloved grandmother Kayla, and now their little family is joined by another little person. The baby, apparently, was hungry and let it know with discontent crying. Madeleine couldn't get her baby to eat in the car, so she tried to calm her daughter by rocking her and singing the lullaby. Suddenly, her husband turned to her and sharply said, "Immediately soothe her. I'm driving the car. She distracts me with her yelling so abruptly and rudely." Her husband spoke to her, for the first time writing off his strange reaction to the experience of the last few days. The girl tried to answer her husband as gently as possible. "Jacob, she was hungry, and I can't feed her. You'll both have to be patient for a while. I'm not going to put up with it. Either you calm her down, or you'll walk home." Madeleine honestly thought her husband was joking. After all, he couldn't have assumed that a newborn baby wouldn't cry about the kind of concerts infants are capable of putting on. Only the blind, deaf, and living in the deep woods probably didn't know. Jacob babies cry a lot, and that's normal. Also, Kayla is our firstborn. I may not immediately know what she wants. You have to deal with that. She's your daughter too. She didn't understand her husband's outburst. First of all, I'm not going to understand or tolerate or anything like that. If he's the one who nodded at her daughter, will yell like that, we'll go to the orphanage. In the second place, I'm not going to let him call her that collective farm name. Tomorrow I will go and name her Alyssa, as my parents had planned. Thirdly, with pressure, the man continued, seeing that Madeleine wanted to object, "I'm not at all sure of my paternity. You agreed very quickly. It didn't take much convincing. I got pregnant 4 months after I met you. It's your baby. You still have to prove it." Madeleine didn't recognize her husband. Calm, somewhat detached and different. He had never behaved like that, never questioned paternity, never spoken to her so harshly and rudely. "Jacob, what is going on? Why such rudeness and doubts about paternity? And why are you so against me naming my daughter Kayla? I told you several times that I wanted to name her after her grandmother. Did you ask my opinion, or did you just let it be a fact? Remember where you got the name Alyssa from. Your mother never said they were planning on naming me that. That's what they planned on naming me. If I was born a girl, my mother loves that name. And she would have been happy if that had been her granddaughter's name." It seemed that her husband himself was trying to dissipate his anger and stir up a scandal. The girl realized that the best thing now is just to keep quiet and try not to annoy her husband. She hushed like a mouse, clutching her daughter to her chest. The baby, as if sensing her mother's excitement, stopped crying and looked at her mother with big blue eyes. Already in the evening, Madeleine realized that the outburst of anger in the car was just the first signs. Her husband made an ugly scandal after he tasted dinner. A girl just after being discharged from the maternity hospital is not the best cook. But Jacob didn't seem to plan on understanding that. Threw the plate against the wall. He walked out of the kitchen, slamming the door, so the painting fell off the wall. Madeleine had absolutely no idea what had happened in those days when she was in the maternity ward. Her husband had always been calm, unperturbed. The girl had never seen him show such vivid emotion, but now she felt as if someone had possessed him. Everything about his wife and child irritated him. For days he threw dishes, threw things in the trash, badly washed things, screamed if her daughter worried and cried. After living in such hell for a week, Madeleine was determined to find out what caused her husband to change. She had tried several times before, but her husband would not let her even say a word. After another dinner flew into the wall, Madeleine decided to insist on talking. "Jacob, how many times? I only had my baby a week and a half ago. What is going on with you? I don't ask for special treatment, even though the other girls are all about the baby after the birth. But your behavior is just out of line. Can you at least explain what happened?" The husband seemed to be just waiting for that. He jumped out from behind the table, flew up to his wife in a second, grabbed her by the hair, and hissed in her face, "You want to know. You really want to know, and you don't want to tell." Each phrase was accompanied by sharp jerks, which made the girl felt that now her head was going to be separated from her body, pushing the girl against the wall, so that she hit her head and almost passed out. The husband continued shouting, "I found you among the trash. I guess the customers got you, married you when you were knocked up like a cat. And now you're waving your rights around, demanding to be treated well. You're supposed to do everything at my first whim, and not to yell, and calm your filth down. I'm sick of her yelling. Jacob, what are you saying? What customers did you save me from the bullies? And your daughter? Have you forgotten that you didn't want to protect yourself? What did you expect? I can't have children. No girl of mine could give birth to me, though I wanted to. And then look, you show up and you test positive. Go ahead and get married, hide your horns, and raise somebody else's baby. If you don't believe me, let's have a paternity procedure. Madeleine pressed her hand to the wound on her head, from which blood was trickling. I did, my husband said, no longer embarrassed that the neighbors might hear him. Or rather, my parents did, and it turned out that there was a 0% chance of paternity. It couldn't be. Madeleine was shocked, but decided to defend her case to the last minute. No way, no way. The husband cried so hard that the blood vessels in his forehead were about to burst. The girl seriously feared for her life, so she decided to try to calm the man down. There is always the possibility of a mistake. What kind of material had they used? They had only seen her granddaughter when she was discharged, and none of them had ever held her in their arms. How should I know? Or do you think they're lying to me? Why would they do that? So you don't know when or how they did the procedure. I haven't seen the official response from the lab, but you've been making my life a living hell for a week now. What was the scene in the car on the way home? Then they couldn't tell you that the daughter wasn't yours. At this point, my husband hesitated, as if trying to hide something. Jacob, what happened? What did they say about me? We seem to be on good terms with them. A friend of my mom's works in the maternity ward. She said the baby was born looking nothing like me. She's the one who took a lock of hair and gave it to her mother. That's the friend. Whose daughter were you dating? And she left you. Madeleine shouldn't have said those last words. Her husband calmed down a bit, and after speaking, he grabbed her by the neck again with one hand and hit her in the face with the other. The blow knocked her unconscious and she fell to the floor. No one left me. We decided to stay friends, and she, unlike you, never left my horns. She is pure and kind. Don't you dare mention her with your filthy mouth. How long has she been like that? Unconscious with a smashed face and a head wound. The husband left, slamming the door, leaving his infant child and his battered wife alone in the apartment. He returned late at night, with Madeleine still lying on the cold floor. Bleeding and roughly grabbing her by the arm, he jerkily lifted the frail girl to her feet and dragged her into the bathroom. To the fact that in the next room his daughter was bursting out crying. He paid no attention to dragging his wife into the bathroom. He doused her with water, bringing her to consciousness when she was able to raise her head. He dragged her into the room, threw her on the couch, and said, "You have half an hour to gather your belongings and get out of my house. Don't forget to bring your brat. If you dare sign her up for me, you're both dead. I don't want a whore's girl as a wife and the burden of alimony on another man's child. But I have nowhere to go, and I have no money. How will I live?" The girl could hardly think. Her broken head was buzzing with a terrible headache and the absurdity of everything that was happening. Just a few days ago, she had thought she had absolutely everything she needed to be happy. And now everything was crumbling with terrible force, and she didn't understand how to stop this catastrophe. It wasn't my problem anymore. I did all the paperwork myself for the division of property. Don't even think about filing. There's nothing of yours here. I wasn't going to claim anything but you. What happened to you these days? We loved each other. Stop playing the innocent saint. She was in love with half the town she didn't leave me with. Why would you even think that? I was practically always with you or at work. Or do you think I can have an affair with an elderly locksmith or an actor? I've seen you flirt with the young dads of your students. Anyway, pack your bags and get out of my house. At least give me some money for now. I have absolutely nothing. It's a great way to get a fresh start in life. Don't you think? The husband enjoyed humiliating his wife. The girl remembered her grandmother's words that he could not be relied upon. As she put her hand to her head, the girl found that it was beginning to bleed again. Noticing this gesture, her husband said, "Don't even think about going to the police. It will be worse for you. You have no witnesses anyway. You can't prove anything. And I have an ironclad alibi." With these words, her husband grinned nastily, hinting that he was having a nice time in the company of another woman, trying not to think about how to live now. Madeline took out a suitcase and began to put her and her daughter's essentials into it. It was good that it was summer outside and there was no need to look for a warm place to sleep. While her husband went into the other room, she put in the suitcase a bottle and a package of formula she had bought in case she had problems with milk. It looked like the problems might have started much earlier than she thought. In addition to the formula, she put a bottle of water. She couldn't feed her daughter without fluids, and she was unlikely to be able to buy anything in the next few days. At this point, her brain was working like a stranded island. She only took with her what could help her survive. Madeleine tried not to think about how she would live or where she would go, overcoming the terrible pain in her head. It seems that 2 strokes gave her a concussion. The girl gathered up her daughter, her documents, the jewelry she had left from her mother, her grandmother. She put it all away, trying not to attract her husband's attention. There is no telling whether he would have let her take it all, and tried to feed her daughter so that the baby would calm down and stop crying. To her surprise and great relief, the girl realized that the milk was not missing. Barely had the baby started to eat, Madeleine felt the milk arriving. "Thank God, one less problem," she told herself, though she had little idea how to deal with the rest of the avalanche of trouble. A few minutes later, her daughter was full and fast asleep, and Madeleine got dressed, pulled her cap over her face so as not to draw attention to her broken face, and left the house, to which she intended never to return. Did she know at that moment that fate, the only protector the girl had left, would take cruel revenge on her abuser and reward Madeleine generously? At that moment, she remembered her parents and grandmother and asked them to help her get out of the situation she was in. After walking a few blocks through the deserted streets of the sleeping city, the girl felt she might lose consciousness and drop her daughter. She hadn't slept all night and hadn't eaten in hours. She was beaten, not the best combination for hiking, crouched on a bench. She cradled her daughter in her arms, trying not to fall asleep or drop her. But consciousness gradually left her, and at one point she passed out, collapsing against the back of the bench. She woke up in the hospital. My head was blocked over my eye with a cool bandage on it, and the room was semi-dark, telling me that it had been night outside the window for a long time. Her breasts ached, demanding to be fed to the baby, but he was the one she did not find in the room. Trying to get up, the girl again felt nauseous and dizzy. However, the maternal instinct demanded to find the baby with difficulty, moving her legs, holding onto the wall. The girl opened the door and stepped out into the empty, quiet corridor. A few meters from her room was the post of the nurse on duty, who sat staring at a medical journal. "Young lady, do you know where my baby is?" The woman flinched in surprise and turned to the source of the sound. "You can't get up. You have a severe concussion, a hematoma that could threaten your vision. You could lose consciousness, fall again," the woman said without stopping. She jumped up and ran over to Madeleine, who was really hanging on by her last legs. "Where is my daughter?" "She's in the children's ward. After you were taken by ambulance, she was transferred there." The doctor took a look at her. "She's fine. You don't have to worry. What should you be worried about right now? It's your health. What happened to you? Were you attacked?" "I fell." Madeleine lied, afraid to tell me about her husband. Apparently, the woman grumbled to her fist, but said nothing more aloud. Putting the girl to bed, she left for a few minutes and came back with a breast pump, as her whole nightgown was soaked with milk and her breasts had become hard as a rock, which could have threatened lactostasis. "Do you know how to do it yourself? Or do you need help?" "I haven't tried it yet. I just had my daughter 10 days ago. I can help. After all, I worked in a maternity hospital for 10 years before I went into therapy. The woman obviously liked to talk and took every opportunity to do so. Madeleine even enjoyed hearing that caring female voice that kept her from falling back into unconsciousness. The next morning, the girl was allowed to visit her daughter in the children's ward. Her baby was lying in a transparent crib, which stood in a row of 4 others like it. In one of them, the baby was quietly sleeping with a bottle of formula lying next to him on a diaper roller, and the baby could not grab the pacifier with his lips. Madeleine decided to help the baby while her daughter slept. She took someone else's baby in her arms and tried to feed him from the bottle. The baby was so eager to eat, as if he hadn't eaten in days. In comparison to it, her daughter, who ate sluggishly, grudgingly, was like a noblewoman. In a few minutes, the bottle was empty, and the baby fell asleep soundly. Nourished and satisfied, the girl stood in her arms with him for a few more minutes, wondering why he was left alone with a bottle. After all, he might have choked or not been able to reach it. They must have done the same thing to her daughter. However, there were no rollers next to her baby, and her daughter sweetly snoozed, immediately put the baby back. The harsh voice made her daughter wake up and cry. The baby in the girl's arms did not react to the voice, as if he had long been accustomed to the noise. "Why are you shouting like that? You frightened my baby," said the girl to the nurse who entered. "It is your daughter. Did you come in last night with a beating from the ambulance?" "Yes, that's my daughter. And I came in at night, apparently. But not with a beating, but with a fall injury. Well, that's not for me to figure out. Take your child. Stay away from that boy. What's wrong with him? What's wrong with him?" Sweet baby tried to eat, but you put the bottle down very awkwardly. "They fed my baby the same way. Yours didn't eat too fussy, so you didn't feed her from a bottle, did you?" "No, but you didn't tell me why this baby shouldn't be touched. Is he a leper or is he contagious? Is he an abandoned baby? Don't you want him to be handled?" Sadly said the nurse. "Abandoned? How could that be? I thought they stay in the maternity hospital, and then they are transferred to an orphanage. This one was found at the railway station by a woman and left in a chair. The police brought him to us. Soon we'll be sending him to an orphanage. But he's good. He's obedient. He doesn't yell. He doesn't get naughty. Not like your loudmouth. What a horror to bear. Give birth and leave your own child is for you a horror, and for many people already in the order of things. It's good that she brought it alive and left it in a crowded place. Many leave them in deserted places, or when the nurse saw how pale the girl went, she did not dare to continue. Are you sick? Let me take you to your room. Or should I call someone from therapy? Can I be in the room with the baby? I don't have one. She's not in the way. No, you have a severe head injury. You can't look after her. How am I supposed to feed her? Contact me or come feed her here by the hour. But I can't give you the baby. What about the boy? How long will he be here? He's only 2 weeks old. At least a couple of months, I think. 2 weeks, almost like my daughter's. Madeleine looked at the sleeping boy, and her heart clenched with pain. With me in the maternity hospital in the same room was a woman who for many years could not get pregnant. Then a miracle happened, but the baby died at a long term. The worst thing was that she had to give birth to a stillborn baby. You should have seen the pain in her eyes. And here was a healthy, beautiful boy, live and be happy to raise the baby. And he was abandoned by the dearest, closest person, his mother. A lot of people think that way. Do you have any idea how often you have to chase moms away from abandoned children? Why? How do you approach yours? Rock him, calm him down if he cries. And at the orphanage, no one will come up to them, no one will calm them down, and no one will rock them. So they get used to not waiting, not crying, not demanding attention. Many even manage to rock themselves. How? Yes, in different ways. Who is more comfortable? Poor kids. What about foster families? Well, there are, and fortunately there are many, but they take babies up to a year old. And no one wants bigger babies. Why not? With them, on the contrary, it is easier not to get up at night, not potty trained. You are very much mistaken. Such children are a whole list of diagnoses. They need to be rehabilitated to develop them. Not every parent can do it. And the fontanelle is like a blank sheet. What you write on it, that's what will happen. And the big kids, teenagers, don't take them at all. These children come out of orphanages and are not ready for life at all. Parents are still a prerequisite for a proper upbringing. I grew up without parents. My grandmother raised me. I didn't get to see my granddaughter, but at least you had a grandmother. She replaced your parents, surrounded you with love. In an orphanage, no one loves them. It's good if you have a kind nanny and volunteers take you in their arms. But they also bring gifts and clothes. Remember, when you were a child, toys could replace your parents or clothes were more important than your grandmother. The nurse looked at the girl carefully. No, you are right. There is no substitute for the love and affection of a loved one. It seemed as if, speaking of the abandoned boy, the girl was referring to herself. Come on, I'll take you to your ward. You should be resting at night by now. I look after both your girl and your boy. The woman deliberately did not call him a foundling or a reject, so as not to further traumatize the impressionable girl. While Madeline was in the children's department, a girl with suspected acute appendicitis was assigned to her room. The girl held herself very firmly without screaming or crying. Madeline offered to help, but the doctor insistently declined the offer and gave the girl a sedative injection, after which she soundly slept until morning, awakened by a nurse from the children's department. The shift was ending, and she wanted to fulfill her promise and take her to feed her daughter. While the woman was handing over the shift, Madeline decided to break hospital rules and take the rejected boy in her arms. Not only that, she fed him. There was enough milk for 2 babies. But he's good. He's obedient. He doesn't yell. He doesn't get naughty. Not like your loudmouth. What a horror to bear. Give birth and leave your own child is for you a horror, and for many people already in the order of things. It's good that she brought it alive and left it in a crowded place. Many leave them in deserted places, or when the nurse saw how pale the girl went, she did not dare to continue. Are you sick? Let me take you to your room. Or should I call someone from therapy? Can I be in the room with the baby? I don't have one. She's not in the way. No, you have a severe head injury. You can't look after her. How am I supposed to feed her? Contact me, or come feed her here by the hour. But I can't give you the baby. What about the boy? How long will he be here? He's only 2 weeks old. At least a couple of months, I think. 2 weeks, almost like my daughter's. Madeline looked at the sleeping boy, and her heart clenched with pain. With me in the maternity hospital in the same room was a woman who for many years could not get pregnant. Then a miracle happened, but the baby died at a long term. The worst thing was that she had to give birth to a stillborn baby. You should have seen the pain in her eyes. And here was a healthy, beautiful boy, live and be happy to raise the baby. And he was abandoned by the dearest, closest person, his mother. A lot of people think that way. Do you have any idea how often you have to chase moms away from abandoned children? Why? How do you approach yours? Rock him, calm him down if he cries. And at the orphanage, no one will come up to them, no one will calm them down, and no one will rock them. So they get used to not waiting, not crying, not demanding attention. Many even manage to rock themselves. How? Yes, in different ways. Who is more comfortable? Poor kids. What about foster families? Well, there are, and fortunately there are many, but they take babies up to a year old. And no one wants bigger babies. Why not? With them, on the contrary, it is easier not to get up at night, not potty trained. You are very much mistaken. Such children are a whole list of diagnoses. They need to be rehabilitated to develop them. Not every parent can do it, and the fontanelle is like a blank sheet. What you write on it, that's what will happen. And the big kids, teenagers, don't take them at all. These children come out of orphanages and are not ready for life at all. Parents are still a prerequisite for a proper upbringing. I grew up without parents. My grandmother raised me. I didn't get to see my granddaughter, but at least you had a grandmother. She replaced your parents, surrounded you with love. In an orphanage, no one loves them. It's good if you have a kind nanny and volunteers take you in their arms. But they also bring gifts and clothes. Remember, when you were a child, toys could replace your parents or clothes were more important than your grandmother. The nurse looked at the girl carefully. No, you are right. There is no substitute for the love and affection of a loved one. It seemed as if, speaking of the abandoned boy, the girl was referring to herself. Come on, I'll take you to your ward. You should be resting at night by now. I look after both your girl and your boy. The woman deliberately did not call them a foundling or a reject, so as not to further traumatize the impressionable girl. While Madeline was in the children's department, a girl with suspected acute appendicitis was assigned to her room. The girl held herself very firmly without screaming or crying. Madeline offered to help, but the doctor insistently declined the offer and gave the girl a sedative injection, after which she soundly slept until morning, awakened by a nurse from the children's department. The shift was ending, and she wanted to fulfill her promise and take her to feed her daughter. While the woman was handing over the shift, Madeline decided to break hospital rules and take the rejected boy in her arms. Not only that, she fed him. There was enough milk for 2 babies. But I'm sure no one did anything, because the daughter is definitely his child. Why don't you call your daughter by her name? Didn't you have time to name her? I wanted to name Kayla after my grandmother, but my husband was against it. And then he threatened me not to name my daughter after him. And I just don't know what to do. My husband works at a law firm, and he can help you register your daughter. I mean, you can't even prove it's your child, and you still have to buy transportation tickets with her. Madeline did not think about that at all. After gathering all the necessary documents, she went to the attending physician to ask for a day off to register her daughter. Samantha's husband explained that while she was married, the girl should be registered to her husband and registered at his apartment. Realizing that, very much at risk, the girl nevertheless decided to do as the man advised. A day later, she held in her hands the documents that confirmed that little Kayla, who was quietly snoozing in the crib of the children's ward of the hospital, was her child. In addition, Madeline was legally entitled to a payment on an ordinary certificate. Madeline was able to complete all the necessary paperwork and receive all the payments in one day, thanks to the help of her husband, Samantha. He suggested several times that she file a report with the police and have the beatings documented. But the girl was very afraid of her husband. She was afraid he would find her and hurt her. Okay, if it was her, but what about her daughter? Thanks to the help of a concerned neighbor and her husband, Madeline not only managed to register her daughter, but also received a fairly good financial support, which should be enough for the first time after the move. Staying in town was not an option for the girl. The money would not be enough even for the first time, but to live in the countryside was enough. So Madeline made the decision to go to the countryside. The village, the kind that was commonly referred to as deaf. Well, that's good. Less prying eyes and total absence of suitors, she said to her reflection. Who are you lying to, though? A black eye like that will keep all those who want to meet you away for a long time to come. The young body recovered fairly quickly, and a week later Madeline was discharged. Samantha was discharged earlier, but they exchanged contacts and promised to see each other as soon as possible. From the hospital, Madeline went to the train station and took train tickets to the district center, not far from where the village where Madeline grew up was located. The journey was not easy for the girl. Still feeling weak and at risk of losing consciousness, the girl tried not to pass out so as not to lose the suitcase and not to drop the child. In the next seat was an older woman who repeatedly offered to help with the baby. Eventually, Madeline gave up and fell asleep, while the neighbor rocked little Kayla in her arms. An hour later, the woman woke her up because the baby was persistently demanding food. From the train station, the girl took a bus and after an hour of travel in a stuffy, overcrowded bus, she made it home. Her grandmother's little house was in the middle of a large young frontage. For as long as she could remember, Madeline had always loved summer and fall. It was for this abundance that she and her grandmother never let a single berry go to waste. Jam, compote, mixed, frozen berries, all of these carefully filled the shelves in the basement. In the fall, mushrooms and vegetables were added to this abundance. Madeline remembered that during the 6 months that had passed since her grandmother had left, they had not been to the village a single time. And that meant there must have been a lot of supplies in the basement. The grass in the garden had grown to her waist. But the girl was not frightened by the difficulties. The main thing for her and her daughter was home. "Well, hello, Granny," said the girl to the large portrait of her grandmother, which hung just opposite the entrance. "Here I am back. You were right, as always, but you're not going to scold me. We seem to be here for a long time, if not for good." The girl caught herself thinking that she was talking to her grandmother as if she were alive, constantly feeling the presence of a relative. She was afraid that everything in the house would remind her of her grandmother and upset her. However, everything in the house, on the contrary, gave her strength. The girl was glad she had not listened to her husband and put the house up for sale when she had barely entered her inheritance rights. Madeline missed the season of planting beds, seedlings, and seeds, and she didn't have the energy to do it all. But she could get the house and grounds in order. And in the closet in the attic, she found a whole bunch of children's things that grandmother had carefully preserved since Madeline was little. "Daughter, you and I are still going to be happy here. I'm sure we have everything we need to be happy, and the source of our unhappiness is far away." Stopping at the mirror, the girl looked sadly at her reflection. A huge bruise was halfway down her face. The swelling had subsided and her eye was starting to open, but it was full of blood. Luckily, her eyesight was intact and the concussion was not severe, but she did not look very presentable. Thank God her teeth were intact. There was an upside to everything. And the bruise will go away. She shouldn't show her face in front of so many people. Down in the basement, she found several months' worth of groceries. A neighbor, whom they had asked to take everything for herself at the wake, said, "No, you'll come and get it yourself. You'll need it, won't you?" Her grandmother, Kayla, tried so hard. She made compote and jam for her granddaughter. "And we'll take it. Eat it yourselves." Madeline didn't argue then. And now she was glad of her neighbor's foresight. She should have gone to her house and told her she was here, that no homeless people were living there. But the girl certainly didn't look like a guest. So she decided to wait until the neighbor herself arrived and fed her daughter. The girl decided to put the house in order. "Well, Kayla, no. You have more than one helper. You have to eat all the milk. You have milked me and my milk brother. What do you do with that abundance of milk? Except to express it and freeze it." The girl heard that some breastfeeding mothers did that, and then used the milk to feed their babies. In the basement, she found many small baby food jars. After washing and sterilizing them, she decided to start freezing the milk that her daughter had not had time to eat. The memory of the abandoned boy made her heart sink with pain and resentment for that little angel. Maybe the mother would change her mind and take the boy back after all. Unlikely, but still, or a caring family like Samantha and her husband will take him away. 2 days at his grandmother's house were spent in constant worrying about cleaning, fixing things up. The house had not changed much in 6 months. All that was needed was a good wash and airing. The warm weather allowed her to leave her daughter in the garden, in the shade of trees, busy scrubbing the floors. Madeleine did not immediately hear the gate open, and someone walked along the path to the house. "Who's there?" "We have someone lying alone." The intruder obviously did not expect to see an infant standing in the garden of the house. "And where is our mommy? And who even let her in here in someone else's house?" Locked up, continuing to speak, the man took Kayla in his arms and entered the house. Madeleine, not hearing this short monologue, saw only the man holding her baby girl in his arms. Immediately put my daughter back where you took her. We're to put her in a basket under a tree with a swarm of bees and bumblebees flying around." The stranger was clearly shocked by this reception and completely forgot the purpose of his visit. "I repeat for the last time. Put my daughter down. She is my child. If she is lying in the garden, then I am her mother, and I have decided that she is not in danger." "All right, but let her lie here," the man pronounced and placed Kayla on the wide bed. Madeleine noted that he had placed pillows next to her so that the girl wouldn't fall, though at her age these were completely unnecessary precautions. "So now answer me, what are you doing in this house? Don't you know it's a crime to occupy someone else's house? It was locked. How did you manage to pick the lock?" he said, examining the fragile figure of the girl. "And who are you to make me explain anything to you? You're certainly not the owner of the house. You can't know that. Not only that, but I know what's written on every photo hanging on that wall over there," Madeleine said, nodding at a large frame that contained a large number of family photos. "From where?" "Really? Where from?" "Maybe from the same place. Where did I get the key to open the lock and get into the house?" "Are you the owner of this house?" My mother asked Dylan to check the neighboring house of the landlady, who passed away 6 months ago, and the granddaughter never came. My mother's fears were that someone had taken over the house, and the neighbor's granddaughter had assigned them to look after it. My grandmother was the landlady, and I was her granddaughter. "Aunt Anna sent you?" "Yes, my mother asked me to check the house. I didn't know she had a son." It was only now that Madeleine noticed how handsome the intruder was. "My father and I rarely visited, and there's a big age difference between us." He hinted at the young age of the girl. Madeleine realized that for half an hour she was talking to a man who could see the huge bruise on her face and made no comment about it. Embarrassed, she tried to pull her headscarf over the broken part of her face. The husband had beaten her. The man seemed to ask the question, mechanically noticing how embarrassed the girl was. "Where did you come from? I mean, what makes you think that? What's all this nonsense?" "I fell down the stairs. Lack of sleep with the baby." Madeleine was rambling, which only confirmed the guest's hunch. "Young lady, I'm a trauma surgeon. Your hematoma is the result of a fist bump from a short distance. It happened about 10 days ago." 11. The girl mechanically corrected herself by taking the seat in the chair. "Concussion. What was the treatment?" "Dizzy. I don't want to talk about it. And I beg you not to tell anybody about your guesses. Young lady, I'm not asking to add to your gossip base. I'm a doctor, and I need to know whether or not you received medical attention after the beating." "In the morning I went to the hospital, where I stayed for a week. The doctor said I was fine. Well, almost fine. And the baby, he was beaten up too." "No, you what?" "I'm okay." A lot of experience makes you ask questions like that. We're not in a doctor's office, so let's get back to why you're here. I would have warned Aunt Anna myself a long time ago, but because of that, the girl pointed at her face. I decided to wait and not to bother her unnecessarily. They've known me here since I was a kid. I do not want them to think that I am bad. "Okay, I'll tell my mom that my houses are occupied," the guy said with a smile and turned around to leave. "No, don't. She'll come to visit right away with a pie. Tell her I'm sick." "No. Then she'll take to treat me. And I don't care if she gets sick herself. That's how she nursed my grandmother when she had the flu and I was small." "What should I do?" "Tell the truth." "No way. I don't want to worry her and upset her." "You didn't listen to the truth you told me. You fell down, smashed your face, embarrassed. You didn't want to bother her. Of course she'll come in with some miracle ointment, but she won't go to the police to report your husband. It's him. I'm not mistaken. It's none of your business." Madeleine was still hesitant. "As a doctor, I am willing to confirm what you said about the fall. Where and on what shall we fall?" "You are a doctor. You know better. What kind of fall can have such marks from a fist that suddenly appeared?" He couldn't help but sneer. "But there's something else," missed Madeleine. His quips are there. Let it be the corner of the table. The bruise is already blurred, and the eye is almost restored. And my mom's not a doctor. I don't think she'd hesitate. Thank you. Try to say all this as cheerfully and optimistically as possible. You keep her from visiting for at least a couple more days. I'm not ready to have visitors. Okay, how do you eat? What do you need that for? She's bound to ask. It's also about whether you're skinny or not. Tell me I eat well and I'm not skinny. And seriously, no one has lived in the house. Do you have groceries? Medicine, diapers, formula? After each question, Madeline became more and more nervous, so the man decided not to continue. Okay, I'll tell him you're fine. Goodbye. Goodbye, said the girl with evident relief. At that moment, Kayla, sweetly sleeping through the noise of the conversation, squirmed on the bed and cried, loudly demanding to be fed. Enough guests for one day, the girl said, settling into an armchair with her daughter. Kayla, we've been declassified. Now we have to lie. And you know how Mommy doesn't like that. But we can do it, right? Said the girl and kissed Madeline's daughter's tiny hand. Madeline, are you home? The morning visitor clearly had no intention of waiting long for the door to be opened, so he pushed the door open with his shoulder and stepped inside. Hello again, said the girl, coming out to meet him. What are you doing robbing the local store? She said, seeing the huge bags that the man was trying to hold in his hands. No, replied the visitor briefly, clearly not intending to give any explanations and figuring out where to put the bags. This is humanitarian aid from your mother. I told you to tell her I'm fine. You still have the receipt. I'll return the money, she said. She was horrified to think that all her money could have been spent on such purchases. You won't get anything back. And it's not humanitarian aid. Or rather, not all of it. It's humanitarian aid. Mom sent you this package. It's steamed chicken and rice and chicken soup. It's all safe for a nursing mother, he explained. And the rest is not for you. Where does Kayla sleep, by the way? What else can a 2-week-old baby do? Fine. She hasn't woken up yet. Unpack the bags. I'm not opening them until you explain what this is all about. Tiredly, I put my burden down on the floor, still unable to find a place to put it. The man sighed heavily and said, Did you come with a baby? Beaten. After the hospital, you could hardly take more than one suitcase with you. And for an infant and a nursing mother, you need a lot. I don't remember exactly what it is anymore, but the salesman helped me. Remember, I have a son, had a son, but this is not about him now. If you are concerned or offended by my involvement, I don't give a damn. I care about the baby. And if your selfishness won't let me take it all, I'll call the police in custody. That's fine. A real man's gesture, said the girl without a trace of sarcasm. I'm sorry if I was harsh, but I'm really worried about the baby. Have we given you reason to be? No, the girl looks fine. And maybe I really overreacted. I'm sorry. I was just trying to help. It was a little weird. Calmly said the girl that in the bags are diapers and nappies, clothes, baby cosmetics, formula, products for you, first aid kit for the newborn, bottles, pacifiers, and potty. The girl finished, noticing a bright pink plastic toilet bowl and potty sticking out of one of the bags. The guest finished and smiled. Do you think it's a little early? A little 6 to 7 months. Did it ever occur to you to ask if I needed it? There's a first aid kit in the house, plenty of diapers and clothes left over from me. You don't need food. I fed 2 in the hospital, and they both ate enough. What else you got in there? I'm not taking anything, he warned me. Suit yourself. I'll be off then. Goodbye then. What is Kayla doing sleeping? Did you ask already? The man hesitated for a few more seconds and then turned to open the door. My name is Dylan, by the way. Pleased to meet you. Goodbye then. Thank you very much. But I'm really not used to this kind of attention, especially when it is not asked, she said quietly and already in the back of the man leaving. Not everyone is like your husband, believe me. And I thought your work experience proves just the opposite. No, there aren't many such fiends. I don't want to talk about it. You would report it to the police. I don't want to talk about it. Madeline coined these words so that Dylan had no doubt that there was no point in talking about it any further. Have you always been this rude, or have you been this rude recently? My mother described you as sweet and kind. You know, our conversation got off on the wrong foot. Madeline realized that she had been too rude to the man who decided to help her. But her feelings of resentment toward her husband had somehow been transferred to these insolent and self-righteous Dylan. Yet he helped her, and for that he should be thanked at the very least. Put the kettle on, Mother. Have you got any more of that pie you're allowed to? He nodded at her breasts, which had been waiting half an hour for the little girl to wake up. Madeline blushed thickly and tucked into the cardigan her grandmother wore. That's right. Keep them warm. Mastitis is no joke. This explanation made Madeline glow even more, and went to put the kettle on and sort out the generous and unexpected help. Dylan's gifts took up more than one box, but he had really thought of every detail, except for the many baby remedies. Madeline found several packs of nursing liners and hygiene cream packs and young maternity loafers. Gosh, I hope he had a counselor pack it all. Let him not know about half of what he bought, pleaded the girl, taking apart the bag of hygiene products in the bathroom. Knowing full well that the man had probably packed everything he needed himself, making his guest tea and putting a pie on the table, the girl left him alone and went to feed her daughter. She returned in half an hour, and immediately she was bombarded with questions. And where is the second child? What second child? I have one daughter. You said you fed 2 babies at the hospital. Oh yes, in the children's ward, where my daughter was while I was in therapy, there was a foundling boy the same age as Kayla. The nurses forbade me to approach him, but I felt so sorry for him that I started feeding him. And I told the nurses that I had a lot of milk, but I didn't know how to strain it. Again I lied. I saw jars of milk in my cell. What were you doing in my freezer? I was steaming my mother's meatballs. I have to cook them to keep the little girl's tummy from getting sick. Don't you think you're being overprotective? You want me to let my mother in here? The man raised an eyebrow. I don't think you ought to bother her. Bother my mother? You don't remember her very well, do you? She's ready to rush in right now with her concern for you. I remember her, and I know how Granny was grateful to her when Aunt Anna came out and looked after me. So you didn't tell me about the boy. I really didn't know how to pump back then. I didn't even know how to breastfeed yet, but he was such a quiet, beautiful, beautiful boy. What kind of injustice is that? The man took a deep breath and said, Trust me, I know a lot about injustice. And how old is your son? Madeline decided to move the conversation to a more positive topic. 8. Would have been Madeline ready to bite her tongue off. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. I should have known when you said you had a son. He was only 2 weeks old. He was born underweight. The doctors kept him in the ditch. The nurse didn't wash the instruments well and got him infected. And his wife. And luckily his wife didn't find out. She left this world a week and a half before her son after a routine sepsis. The doctors didn't notice that part of the placenta remained in her and the 3 days she was thrashing around in, delirious with fever. They didn't think to give her an ultrasound. The man seemed to be immersed in memories and completely forgot that there was a girl sitting at the table with him. Did you sue them? The girl was so shocked that she couldn't find the right words, so she blurted out the first thing that came into her head. What was the point? It wouldn't bring them back for the whole ward. I knew that the maternity hospital was the most disgusting. But I was on a business trip. The birth began almost 3 months prematurely. The ambulance took my wife to the nearest maternity hospital. When I arrived, my wife was gone, and Michael was struggling for life. I got to see him and even hold him in my arms. I'm so sorry for your loss. It's the worst thing that could ever happen. Yes, you're right. I couldn't go home at the time. My wife wasn't superstitious. She bought everything for the baby in advance, We had a room ready for him and a crib and a stroller and a bathtub and a potty. The man played it up, smiling. But Madeleine knew how hard these words are not easy for him. Where did you put everything? I asked my friends to pick everything up and take it to the nearest orphanage. Children's things should belong to children, not become exhibits in a museum of grief. For the first time in the past 8 years, Dylan told someone about the tragedy that forever divided his life into light and black halves. For the past 8 years, his life had become a job. Nothing and no one could distract him from his troubled thoughts. Until now, for the first time in many years, he had awakened an interest in life. He wanted to make a fuss, to take care of this girl who was in a difficult situation. But the main reason was the blue-eyed baby who looked at him so trustingly and intently. This morning, when he found her in the garden, he fell in love at first sight, completely and irrevocably. He knew for sure that he would not let Michael hurt anyone, not even her own mother. That's why he bought so many things. That's why he made her take all of them so rudely and aggressively. And where does Kayla sleep? In the room on the bed. Can I see her? I won't wake her quietly. Let's go. Before 1 month, babies sleep so soundly. You could play the drums. Anyway, that's how mine sleeps. I sometimes have a hard time getting her up to feed her. For the next 10 minutes, Dylan just stood there admiring the sleeping baby. He felt a kind of unbreakable bond with her, the same way he felt when he took his son in his arms. I should probably go. And it's late for you to go to bed, to take advantage of the moment before the baby wakes up. I'm sleepy, to tell you the truth. Goodbye. Thank you very much. You've done a lot for us. Madeleine did not continue. What he did many times more than his own father did for Kayla, or rather his own father did nothing. He even forbade her to take his last name and file for child support. I wonder how he intends to get a divorce without me being there, she said aloud to herself, and suddenly realized that she felt no fear of her husband. For the first time since he had thrown her out on the street beaten with a child. Yes, mother, how little you need for happiness one man's act, and you are already counting on his protection. If her husband comes, she thought. But deep in her heart, she knew for sure that Dylan would protect her too. And Kayla. Falling asleep that night, Madeleine could not have imagined that at the same time her husband's parents were choosing a grave marker for their only son. After kicking out and beating his wife, Jacob went to the bar, which had become his favorite place of late. Pregnant wife and perpetually brain-dead mother were getting fed up, and the bar with its beautiful waiters became a place of relaxation. His mother was on his mind every day because his wife was not carrying his child. He began to doubt paternity himself, even though he was the first man. Madeleine's wife also became annoying. All she did was talk about the baby and the pregnancy, and he wasn't interested in that at all. He thought she was having a baby, so he occasionally allowed himself short dates with girls from the bar. That night he needed to relax, de-stress. Besides, he hoped his wife would wake up and crawl away with her screaming brat herself. After drinking heavily, he went home, where he found his wife still lying unconscious on the floor, kicking her out of the house. Jacob decided to continue the celebration of his long-awaited freedom, but he miscalculated and fell asleep with an unextinguished cigarette. The firefighters were called by neighbors when thick smoke poured into the stairwell, and there was no one left to be rescued by the paramedics. The neighbor, who had seen Madeleine leave the house with the suitcase and the baby a few hours before the fire, was in fact the only witness who could confirm the girl's alibi. In spite of this, however, Jacob's parents testified, accusing her of burning their son Madeleine, who had no idea what to expect. The police might start looking for her. Pretty quickly, they found out that the girl had been admitted to the hospital that night, and the timing of the fire coincided with when she had already been admitted to the emergency room. No matter how many times Jacob's parents tried to get her convicted, the facts spoke in her defense. The question remained open as to who would be the heir to the deceased. Having a child and a wife blocked the parents from having access to the apartment and the expensive foreign car that the young family had bought after the wedding. Despite the fact that Jacob bought the apartment before marriage, and Madeleine could not get it, there remained his daughter. The mother of the deceased knew for a fact that her son had not had time to register the girl, but that did not mean that their crafty daughter-in-law had not done so, raising all her connections. The woman found out that Madeleine had not only registered the girl in her husband's name, but had registered her at her mother's place of residence. She had no rights to register. But the registration also made things very difficult. In addition, the woman was not sure that her daughter-in-law knew at all that she had become a widow, and she decided to pull off a simple plan, not to inform the notary that her son had heirs. The property went to the parents, and the car could be sold retroactively. When the son was still alive, he could sell it himself. The child was not listed on any of his documents, so he was not considered an heir. However, fate sometimes plays a surprising chess game. The notary who took their inheritance documents turned out to be none other than Samantha's husband, who helped Madeleine process all the documents for her daughter. Naturally, he realized who was in front of him. Naturally, on the same day, he and Samantha got in the car and drove to the village to tell Madeleine some rather shocking news. In the morning, Madeleine was awakened by a car horn that insistently demanded that the owners open the gate and let the unexpected guests in. David and Samantha had driven all night and were literally ready to take the gate off its hinges with impatience. Madeleine, for a few minutes, trying to believe that these were really the very friends who had helped her in her hour of need, threw herself into Samantha's arms with a joyous cry. However, after a couple of hours, the joy was replaced by fear. The girl was very afraid that her husband's parents would want to eliminate Kayla as a potential heiress, to which David hastened to assure her that all was not so terrible. "What are you afraid of? On the contrary, I came to tell you that you must immediately declare your inheritance rights. Otherwise, they'll sell the car and take over the burnt apartment. No, I don't want anything from them. Let them choke on the apartment and the car. They've been so bad to me. They got their revenge for me. Though God knows I didn't wish it on them. It's scary how it burned. Come on." I don't think he felt anything. He'd had so much to drink, he could have been half burned before he noticed it. When he saw Madeleine turn pale, he hastened to justify his frankness. I mean, it didn't hurt him, although it better had, considering what he'd done to you. David clenched his hands in a fist, imagining how a big, strong man would dare raise his hand against a small, fragile girl. "Really, Madeleine, we'll help you get the truth." Samantha decided to help him convince his friend to fight for what was rightfully hers. "No, I won't fight for anything. I decided I had nothing when I got married. My salary did not contribute significantly to the purchase of the car. I have no right to it. And the apartment belongs to your daughter. You want to deprive her of what she's owed. You think she'll thank you later. She won't, because she won't find out. Jacob's parents don't know where Grandma lived. That's why they won't come looking for us. You're wrong. At least you're entitled to survivor's benefits. And some of the other benefits. You just had a baby. You can't work. What are you gonna live on? Grandma's house is fine. But what happens when winter comes? Besides, do you know that they wanted to accuse you of arson and the death of your husband? No. How is that even possible? How? Very simple. He fell asleep, and you set him on fire out of revenge. Well, judging by the fact that the police aren't looking for me, she didn't succeed. No, the roommate definitely remembered when you left. She saw you through the peephole and heard you, I'm sure. Only no one came to help, I guess, and the hospital recorded the time of your arrival in the ambulance. And it also said you were unconscious for a long time, and the apartment was just burning up. The fire department was called later, so there was no proof of your guilt. Samantha enjoyed telling her friend that she didn't have to be afraid of her husband anymore, and that the worst was over. So I see no reason to sit here and be afraid and not fight for my money, the man concluded. David sincerely did not understand such naive and proud girls, demanding nothing of anyone, proudly bending over 3 jobs in an attempt to provide for a child. He was determined to get the girl to collect all the paperwork and get everything that was owed to her and the baby. David, you don't understand. I'm alone. I have no protection. I am honestly afraid of my parents and my husband. Explain to me what benefits I am entitled to, but I will not pry into the inheritance. I have made up my mind firmly. And so we agreed. After staying with the girl for 2 days, the family went back to the city, taking her promise to prepare for their next visit and go to the city to draw benefits. Some of the paperwork David as a notary took care of. Jacob's parents were shocked to learn that their daughter-in-law had managed to enroll their daughter in their son's name. But they have no plans to take away anything that belonged to Jacob from them. David even gave them a message from his daughter-in-law with undisguised pleasure. Please accept my condolences and choke on your possessions. She said so. What a wretch, I'll grind her to powder. The mother of the deceased was ready to walk to the village and tear Madeline with her own hands. Don't you wonder how she found out about it in the first place? The thought didn't seem to cross their minds. To her, I'll be honest, I was shocked at her decision. I would have ripped you off to the fullest extent of the law, starting with a beating. What beating? And how do you know her? You sleep with her. She probably brought the child from you, not from me. My wife met Madeline in the hospital, where the poor girl came in with a broken face and a severe concussion, which came after your ghoul son scratched his wife in the fist. Do you know what you're talking about? I'm gonna sue you. Based on what? I don't have video or audio in my office. I refuse your so-called services, and I'll go to another specialist. Yes, for God's sake. Madeline has weighed your property anyway. So live and be happy if you can. And remember, the only family member you have, your granddaughter, is growing up somewhere. And you have deprived yourself of the opportunity to communicate with her. She's not our family. We had her DNA tested. Who are you trying to fool? Aren't you ashamed of yourselves? Did you ever think that Madeline might start a lawsuit against the maternity hospital? She'll sue for taking her baby's material for examination without the parents' permission. Your friend, if she even exists, would be out of a job like a cork. No one in their right mind would do something like that. So there are only 2 conclusions. Either you're lying or you've been lied to. And now's a good chance for you to get it off your chest and tell the truth. I don't see the need to justify myself to some lowlife. Jacob's mother jumped out of the office, dropping a chair on the way. But you addressed the young man to the father of the deceased. Open the veil of mystery. Little Kayla, your granddaughter. She needs relatives. We didn't do any tests. It was my wife and her friend who made it up. They'd been screwing with my son for a long time. Eventually, he lost his temper and took it out on his wife. Don't think I'm making excuses. I was annoyed by this Madeline from day one, so I kept quiet and was not against my spouse's plan. Yes, I am sorry that my son died as a result, but I don't want this girl you call my granddaughter. The man got up and followed his wife out. Yes, lucky Madeline with relatives, said to himself David, and opened a folder with documents on their case. When the due date expired, Jacob's parents assumed inheritance rights over their son's property. They decided to sell the apartment and the car so that nothing would remind or upset them. Besides, in that case, their granddaughter would have nothing to claim. Nothing had changed in their callous souls. They did not realize that their behavior had ruined their son's life and were indirectly to blame for his death. They had no desire to communicate with their granddaughter, and after a while they completely forgot about her. After moving to another city, Madeline could not find her place all morning. She shuddered at every rustle and sound. Her husband instilled such fear in her that she transferred it to his parents. Even having waived all claims, she was afraid they would retaliate. Perhaps hormones played a role, and the postpartum body rebuilding. But the girl was afraid not so much for herself as for her daughter. After all, it was Kayla who was first in line for Jacob's inheritance, and therefore the main rival to her grandparents. She was waiting for her friends to arrive to find out how this whole inheritance thing would end for her. By lunchtime, their car pulled up outside the house. David helped her write a declaration of disinheritance. However, there was a possibility that the child welfare authorities would sue on behalf of the child. David, you could just not state anywhere that Jacob had a child. I can pretend I didn't know about Kayla. After the 6-month period is up, your husband's parents will take over the inheritance, and you will forget about each other. They won't track us down. They didn't plan to pursue us. But my father admitted that there was no examination. Once in their conversation, I threatened to sue and fire the employee of the maternity hospital, who allegedly at Kayla. She took a hair sample for analysis. That's when they spilled out. I want to forget this like a bad dream. Maybe you can do that. Let's take our minds off it for a moment. Samantha was getting pretty tired of all the talk about inheritance. She and her husband had decided to spend a couple of days at Madeline's in the country, and they did not want to think about her husband's work. Today they planned to go to the river and sunbathe. They had been spending a lot of time lately driving to the village to discuss Madeline problems in a surprising way. They became even friendlier. They worked cohesively, like a real team. It had been a couple of months since they had met Madeline, and it seemed as if they had known her all their lives. They decided to walk to the picnic. The hot summer weather was perfect for relaxing by the water, but after a few minutes they had to change their plans. She didn't walk more than a few dozen meters. Samantha lost consciousness. David barely had time to catch his wife in his arms. Sunstroke with all its consequences. Nausea, dizziness, weakness. When the symptoms lasted more than a day, Madeline decided to ask Dylan for help. He visited her mother every weekend and never missed an opportunity to stop by and bring a gift or help her mother with anything. When Madeline told him that she had friends coming over for the weekend, she wanted him to meet them. The man decided that their relationship was somehow stealthily going in another direction, but he wasn't ready for that. So he, citing business, refused. And when the girl came running for help, he couldn't say no to her friend. Madeline became ill and needed medical attention. The ambulance refused to go to their neck of the woods because there was no threat to the girl's life. I don't know what's wrong with her. It looks more like sunstroke, but she was only in the sun for about 10 minutes. I'm actually a trauma surgeon and therapy isn't really my area of expertise. If anything, I'll take her to the city, to the hospital. As a medical professional, all the doors are open to me there. Do you suspect something serious? I'm not ruling anything out. Let's go. Dylan's cursory examination and questioning was enough to understand the cause of the girl's ailment. But after talking to David, he decided to send them to the district center to see a doctor he knew. By evening, a happy David and Samantha were back at Madeline's house. As Dylan had suspected, Samantha's indisposition was due to a long-awaited and much-desired pregnancy, just as the doctor had told them. A distraction was needed, a diversion of attention to something else. They diverted for several weeks, helped by Madeline. In the morning, the parents-to-be went home, promising to return. As soon as Samantha was examined by her doctor and confirmed that the pregnancy was progressing normally, it wasn't until the fall that the girl was able to return to visit. Pregnancy was not easy for her. Constant intoxication and the threat. Miscarriage did not allow her to risk leaving the city for a long time. In addition, at one of the examinations, the doctor who conducted an ultrasound examination expressed suspicion that Samantha could carry not one child, but 2. He decided to share his suspicions with a more experienced colleague who was more experienced. At the second examination, which was scheduled 2 weeks later, the doctors clearly heard 2 heartbeats and saw 2 fetuses. Several years of trying to get pregnant were rewarded with double joy. In the evening, Madeline's neighbors stopped by for tea. After her face had been cleaned up, the girl herself went with her daughter to the woman who had done so much for her and her grandmother. Aunt Anna had aged very dramatically over the past few months. It happens so that a person holds on for a long time and then gives up, and age changes appear very suddenly. The woman could not be happy about her young neighbor and her little daughter. She delicately did not ask about the reason for their move. until Madeline herself told her that her husband had died. So she came back to the house. The grandmother grieved for the still young boy. The woman asked about Madeline's plans for the rest of her life. I haven't made any plans yet. As long as Kayla is little, I'm not going anywhere. Maybe you should get a job at a school in the district center. I can take care of the baby during the day and Dylan can drive you to work. Doesn't he live downtown? No, he's gonna live here now. He lived with his father half his life. Then he was gone, and my son came to see me more often. And now here will be a short drive to work. He has a place to live there. He can stay there sometimes. Why did he move to you? She asked, noticing that the older woman was noticeably upset when she talked about it, although she tried not to show it. I do not have long, wants to be with me. And you still want me to leave a small child with you. Do you need to rest? Remember how you took care of Grandma. I'll never let you get so tired. Now I'll come to you myself on the household. To help with the cleaning and cooking is not difficult for me, said the girl. Barely a neighbor tried to object. Your grandmother raised you well. It's a pity she couldn't be happy about her great-granddaughter. Well, I'll tell her. Their woman pointed her hand to the sky. And what a clever girl you are, and what a doll God gave you. At that time, Dylan entered the house and was somewhat taken aback to see the women sitting there, hugging each other and crying. I missed some kind of mourning event. No, son, we were just remembering Grandma Kayla. Grandma, I thought she was barely 3 months old. He tried to make a joke. I named my daughter after my grandmother. Well, I guess it's time for us to get dark, have a bath, and then go to bed. Son, show them out. We have to walk a few meters. We'll manage, said the girl, noticing how happily the man perked up. At the beginning of their acquaintance, he had been aloof, even cold. She understood why he refused to meet David and Samantha. But in the last few days, he had changed. He tried to visit her more often, to be alone with her, to help support her. Madeline herself was also aware that she had become attached to him, and that she had feelings that were far from friendly. However, she was frightened by the prospect of trusting a man again after her husband had beaten her. She became afraid of men. Even their touch was frightening. I will help Kayla bathe. You know how much I like it. Well, okay, you talked me into it. This little berry also likes your attention more when I bathe her, is capricious and mischievous. And with you quiet and angelic, she is always an angel, right? Said Dylan and took the girl in his arms. Goodbye. The neighbor said goodbye to Madeline and the elderly woman and left the house. Madeline, maybe we should switch to you already. How long have we known each other? Enough, she smiled. Well, that's settled then. How would you like to take this charm for a walk tomorrow? That charm? It would be nice to take it to the hospital. We haven't even been seen by a pediatrician since we got out of the hospital. As someone who knows a little bit about medicine, I can tell you that the girl is perfectly healthy. But the fact that she is not vaccinated, that's a problem. So tomorrow we're going for a checkup and vaccinations. I'll call today and make all the arrangements. The next day, they went with the little girl to the medical checkup, after which the girl received some vaccinations and set dates for the rest. On leaving the hospital, the girl remembered the boy she had met at the hospital. How was he? Did they take him away, or is he still alone? Dylan, do you have a lot to do today? No, I switched for today to drag you to your appointments, and we can drive to the town where I used to live. We can. You want to visit Samantha? Samantha too. But most of all, I want to find out what happened to the boy who was a foundling in the children's ward that you nursed. Let's go. The man seemed to be thinking about this child himself, and also had a hard time imagining how it was possible to abandon one's own child. At the hospital, they were told that the boy was still in the children's ward. The nurses were so attached to him that they did not want to send him away. He was periodically diagnosed and therefore not discharged. Besides, if his mother showed up, it would be much easier to get him out of the hospital. Dylan offered to buy the boy some presents, bought everything he needed, and they drove to the hospital. Suddenly, The man stopped and said to Madeleine, "Let's go get him. You know a lawyer. I'll use my contacts. Let's do it." Madeleine didn't even think about how they were going to do it and how much trouble was in store for them. The thought that she wanted to raise this child had not left her since the first time she held him in her arms. Besides, she and Kayla had almost identical birth dates. You could introduce them to everyone as twins, and which one of us would have custody or adoption? How is that us together? Or do you think you can get rid of me? Do I get it right? The girl smiled, letting him know that she wasn't against the suggestion he was hesitant to voice. "Madeleine, you and I are not little children. I understand that you have doubts about me, but I promise you will never regret it if you agree to marry me. I promise that I will make you happy. I haven't been in a serious relationship since I lost my wife and son, and I don't plan on ever having one. But you and Kayla have been able to hold a place in my heart, especially Madeleine," rightly said the girl. "Yes, you can be persuasive. What shall we name our son?" he asked and hugged his future wife. The Christian name came out of the blue, but Madeleine had no doubt that it should be her son's name. A beautiful name fully reflects his appearance in our lives. 6 months later, after going through all the circles of bureaucratic hell, the young family was able to take the boy from the orphanage, where he had been moved a couple of days after their visit. The nurse at the children's ward, who remembered Madeleine, said, "You know, I still thought at the time that you were going to take him. You have a kind, compassionate heart. You couldn't just forget about him." "I haven't forgotten him, but I couldn't take him without my husband. They just wouldn't let me have him. And now you have almost twins. I could forgive my husband. What do you mean?" Madeleine genuinely didn't understand why she had to forgive Dylan, who from the first day she met him had demonstrated the qualities of the perfect man, if there were such a thing. "Well, you went to the hospital with a beating." "No, it wasn't him. The one who beat me up died the same day, burned up in his apartment, drank a cigarette, and fell asleep." "How awful. God took you away from him. And where did you meet this one?" "God sent me this one." The girl smiled and went to her husband, who was sitting on the bench with their babies in his arms.